What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? It's Daniel, and welcome back to another video. Today, I'm doing my final updated 2022 NASCAR Cup Series Silly Season predictions. Let's go and just jump straight into it. We're going to start off with double zero car for Starcom Racing. Now, it was confirmed about a month ago, actually a couple weeks ago, as a matter of fact, that Starcom Racing no longer is going to have a charter going into 2022. This was reported from Chris Knight from CashPins.com, and apparently they have sold a charter to Spire Motorsports. So it looks like Starcom Racing is no longer going to be a charter team going into 2022. I, however, think that they are going to be racing in the Cup Series on a part-time basis next year. I do believe they do have a next-gen chassis going into next year, and I still think that Quinn Houff is going to be driving the car. I wonder how many races they're going to do, but I think that Quinn Houff will drive a double zero car, and I think that they will run on a part-time basis going into 2022. The team has not been performing, to be perfectly honest with you, so it doesn't surprise me that they are downsizing a lot, and they're not going to have probably a charter going into next year, and they're giving one to Spire. So, but I still think Quinn Houff will just drive a double zero car full-time in 2022. Up next, we're going to talk about the one car for Trackhouse Racing. This one's already confirmed. Ross Chastain is going to be driving the number one car for Trackhouse Racing. Something very interesting, no, Ross Chastain has not brought in any funding, and Justin Marks has been a big fan of Ross Chastain for a very, very long time, since they were teammates in the NASCAR Truck Series in 2011 when he drove for Stacey Compton's organization in the Truck Series. So he has driven in the past, and I also believe they were teammates at Chip Ganassi Racing a couple years ago, I believe back in 2018. So Ross Chastain is also basically going to be in the same team, because remember, Trackhouse Racing is buying out Chip Ganassi Racing going into 2022 season, and they were earlier this week testing the next-gen car. So Ross Chastain will drive the one car full-time for this team going into 2022. Up next, we're going to talk about the two car for Team Penske. This one's also been confirmed. Austin Cindric is going to be replacing Brad Keselowski in the two car for Team Penske. He will basically be taking the flagship car going into 2022. This makes a lot of sense for many reasons. Number one, Austin Cindric is a son of Tim Cindric, who currently is the president of Team Penske at the moment, and Tim Cindric's been with the team for a very, very long time, and Austin has been part of the development program. The other reason, Austin Cindric is a very, very awesome road course racer. There's potentially going to be a lot more road courses that are on the Cup Series schedule in 2022. And also, he was the first driver to win a championship for Team Penske in any of the top three series in NASCAR since 2012 when Brad Keselowski won the Cup Series championship and when Brad won the 2010 championship. And there's a very strong possibility that Austin could go back to back going into the 2021 season, finishing it out this year. So we'll have to wait and see what happens when Austin Cindric will drive a two-car full-time in 2022. Up next, we're going to talk about the three car for Richard Childress Racing. While this has not been confirmed at the moment, it is believed that Austin Dillon is going to be returning to the team. The reason is, of course, Austin Dillon has been testing the next-gen car for next year, and also Austin Dillon is the grandson of Richard Childress. So, of course, he's probably going to end up driving his car. He's been with the team really since the beginning of his career. And Austin Dillon will be expected to continue driving for this team. I'm very intrigued how he's going to do next year, because RSR were the first diverse team, and every one of the teams have really developed this car. So I'm intrigued to see how he's going to do going into 2022. And maybe he can be able to go out there and build on a pretty solid 2021 season where he barely missed the playoffs year, but has shown a lot of top 10 and top 15 speed throughout this year. Up next, we're going to talk about the four car for Stewart-Haas Racing. This one's already confirmed. Kevin Harvick will be driving for this team once again in 2022 in the four car, as he has a contract going to 2023. Now, about a month or two ago, actually back in July, it had been reported that Kevin Harvick apparently, it was a really, really crazy rumor, that Kevin Harvick apparently had been interested in purchasing JT Doherty Racing, because both drivers are currently driving for JT Doherty Racing, are part of KHI management, but Kevin Harvick denied the rumors. But you have to remember, Kevin Harvick's contract does go through the 2023 season. And while Kevin Harvick has not had an absolutely fantastic year so far, Kevin Harvick is still a very, very solid driver, and I'm very intrigued to see, especially with the new car, that if he can re-perform and show what he's able to do next year in 2022. Up next, we're going to talk about the 5-car for Hendrick Motorsports. This one's already confirmed. Kyle Larson will be driving the 5-car once again in 2022. It had already been announced about 2 or 3 months ago, actually about 2 months ago as a matter of fact, that Kyle Larson had officially signed a contract extension. He already had a contract going through 2022, and he signed a contract extension through 2023. With how good of a driver Kyle Larson has been, especially this year in 2021, it does not surprise me that he's re-signing with this team going in next year. 5 wins so far this year, an all-star win, not to mention what he's been able to do in other forms of racing this year and how many incredible wins he's had. Won the Knoxville National this year, won the, I can't remember the other races that he's won this year, but he's won so many incredible races in 2021. And I think he has a shot to win the Cup Series championship, and he may run the Indy 500 in the future as well. But we will see Kyle Larson back in the 5-car full-time once again in 2022. Up next, we're going to talk about the 6-car for Gms Racing. This one's already confirmed. Brad Keselowski will be moving over from Team Penske over to Gms Racing to drive the number 6 car as a co-owner / driver of the organization going into next season. There's a lot of reasons why Brad Keselowski is doing this. Number one, Brad Keselowski is wanting to get into the ownership game, and he also wanted a long-term contract with an organization, but unfortunately, Team Penske only had provided a 1-year deal from 2020 up till 2021, and he wanted a long-term deal with Team Penske, and apparently he wanted ownership stake in Team Penske as well, but Roger never really granted that. So over time, that equity as an owner is going to grow, and he's going to be making a lot more decisions on what goes over, and he'll also be running some part of the development program as well at this team. I'm very intrigued to see how Brad's going to do going into 2022. Brad has had an off year so far in 2021, but I think Brad will be very, very solid next year considering the equipment he has, and Brad will drive the 6-car full-time in 2022. Up next, we're going to talk about the 7-car for Spire Motorsports. This one's already confirmed. Corey LaJoie will be driving the 7-car full-time for this team once again in 2022. Over the last couple weeks, I won't even bring this up because over the last couple weeks, it seems like Spire Motorsports has been really getting their stuff together. They've had 2 back-to-back, well, they had a top 15, but they have shown top 10 speed over the last couple weeks, and I think the future of this team is really, really promising, and they've been getting faster and faster as the year has gone on. And I'm very intrigued to see going next year if the next car is going to help Corey LaJoie going into season. I think Corey LaJoie could have a very strong run with these cars, and I think we could see a lot coming out of Corey LaJoie, but Corey LaJoie will drive the 7-car full-time next year with Spire Motorsports. Up next, we're going to talk about the 8-car for Richard Childress Racing. While this has not been confirmed at the moment, it is expected that Tyler Reddick will return to Richard Childress Racing going into 2022. It makes a lot of sense. Tyler Reddick was able to make the playoffs this year. It's unclear where he's going to finish in the playoffs this year, but Tyler Reddick has been very, very solid throughout the 2022 season, and I think he's going to be able to do a lot going into next year. I really like Tyler Reddick a lot. I think also the next-gen car, especially if it being more difficult to drive, this could really play in a big factor in how Tyler Reddick performs, especially on the intermediate tracks, even though there's potential that the intermediate tracks could be full throttle a lot of tracks, but probably be very, very solid, and maybe we'll see a win come out of him going into next year. We'll have to wait and see what happens, and I'm very excited to see what Tyler Reddick can do next year at RCR. Up next, we're going to talk about the 9-car for Hendrick Motorsports. This one's already confirmed. Chase Elliott has a contract with Hendrick Motorsports for the 2022 season. However, they are working on a much longer deal for Chase Elliott, potentially to be a long-term deal, potentially to be a lifelong contract with him. But one of the reasons why this contract has not gone through at the moment is because of the sponsors. But I think Chase Elliott deserves to be in the 9-car. He is a champion, won the championship last year. And not to mention, he's been very solid this year. He's been in the top 5 points the majority of the year. He's currently sitting only 4 points above the cutoff line in the NASCAR Cup Series Plus. But he does have 2 wins currently at the moment. Those coming at Circuit Americas and Road America, which is some road course tracks. Chase Elliott will continue driving for this team, and I think he'll be a great driver going forward for Hendrick Motorsports. Up next, we're going to talk about the 10-car for Stewart-Haas Racing. This one has not been 100% confirmed by this team, but Eric Almirola says that he is expected to return to the 10-car full-time in 2022, and I absolutely believe him. And I think the big reason he's coming back to this 10-car going into 2022 is because of the fact that he won that race in New Hampshire. Not only did he basically got lucky, he pretty much straight up earned the victory and got into the NASCAR Cup Series last year, and he's the only driver so far at SHR to score a victory this year. Yes, 2021 has not been really that good, but I also think SHR has really not been that good as an organization as a whole. So it also does help the fact that he brings Smithfield funding into the organization as well, and they're been very, very committed to Eric Almirola. And yes, they did drop some of their sponsorship, the number of races that they were sponsoring Eric Almirola, but I think Eric Almirola will continue to bring a lot to this team going forward, and I think he'll continue to show his talent going forward. Up next, we're going to talk about the 11-car for Joe Gibbs Racing. This one's already confirmed. Denny Hamlin will be driving the 11-car full-time for Joe Gibbs Racing in 2022 as he signed a contract extension, a multi-year extension to be exact, with Joe Gibbs Racing at the beginning of the 2021 season. I think in late January, early February, he signed a contract extension with this organization. Denny Hamlin absolutely deserves to be here. This will be basically where he finishes up his NASCAR Cup Series career. So far, 2021, he's only scored 1 victory, that coming at Darlington, but he's been very, very consistent throughout the 2021 season so far and has a potential shot to be an underdog to overall win the NASCAR Cup Series championship. So it's really cool to see that Denny Hamlin is still going to be continuing to drive for Joe Gibbs Racing going into 2022. Up next, we're going to talk about the 12th car for Team Penske. This one's already confirmed. Ryan Blaney will continue driving with this team for the next couple years. His contract goes through the 2023 season, so his contract ends, I believe, around that time, which is about the same time that another driver we'll talk about really soon in this video when his contract comes to an end. Ryan Blaney's had probably a big breakout year so far with 3 victories and also won 2 of the last 3 races. The races he's won so far this year have been Atlanta, and then he won Michigan and Daytona. Yes, there's been luck that's played a part, and he's been very lucky in some of those races, but he's also been able to go out there and win races as well. So Ryan Blaney, I think, will continue to improve himself and be a driver that can dominate races in the future and not only get lucky wins, but also be dominant in some races going forward as well in 2022. Up next, we're going to talk about the 13 car for NBM Motorsports. I think NBM Motorsports is going to run 2 cars next year, but I think that the 13 is only going to attempt to run a Daytona 500, and if the car is able to qualify in for the 500, they may run the car more going into next year. And I think that Garrett Smithley is going to drive this 13 car in 2022, and the reason is because Garrett Smithley drove in his car and attempted to make Daytona 500, and he barely missed the 500. He got involved in a crash late in the event. I believe in duel number 2. He was actually up front and was really, really fast in that event. The cars looked like they were really fast. They weren't great in qualifying because they were really, really slow and off the pace on speed. But I think we'll see Garrett Smithley continue driving his car going into next year, and I think we'll see him back in his car. I don't think he'll be driving for Rick Ware at any point next year. I think that Garrett Smithley will drive in his car part-time basis. If they're able to make the Daytona 500 going into 2022, I think that Garrett Smithley will drive his 13 car and attempt to make the Daytona 500 for them. Up next, we're going to talk about the 14 car for Stewart-Haas Racing. While this one has not been confirmed, I believe that Chase Briscoe will be back in the 14 car full-time for this team next year. Yes, his rookie year has not been really impressive, but like I mentioned, Eric Almirola, I do think that he's been affected by SHR's faults throughout this year. SHR as an organization has absolutely struggled. And I think Chase Briscoe is a very, very talented driver who can hold his own and knows how to get it done on and off the racetrack, and also is a driver that came from the Ford development program. And you know Ford is going to want to keep him in his organization long term going forward. So I think we'll see Chase Briscoe back in his car next year. He deserves it. He's a very talented driver. And I think next year, especially more road course potentially on the schedule, we could see him take some major improvements going into 2022. Up next, we're going to talk about the 15 car for Rick Ware Racing. Now, Rick Ware Racing has mentioned, and Rick Ware and Cody Ware himself has mentioned that they are planning to potentially have 1 or 2 full-time cars next year, and they're planning to sell 1 or 2 of their charters or lease a couple of their charters going into the 2022 season. But I think that they will have 1 full-time car, and I think that they'll have a rotation in their other car. I think that James Davison is going to get the full-time gig in a 15 car. I think of all the drivers that have driven this car so far this year in any of the Rick Ware Racing cars, I think that so far James Davison has probably been the most impressive. He's been really fast. He's been pretty decent so far. He's given those cars top 30 speed a lot of weekends, and he tends to get out of the way of the leaders. He's had some incidents past with his Rick Ware teammates, but I think James Davison has potential to be good. And if the Rick Ware cars can become a little bit more competitive next year, I think that he will actually improve and help this organization going forward and help them become a much better organization. I think that if you have a driver like James Davison who is good on road courses and good on other forms of tracks as well, I think he'll bring a lot to the table going into next year. Up next, we're going to talk about the 16 car for Kaulig Racing. This one has already been confirmed. Justin Hilly will be driving full-time for Kaulig Racing. It is a multi-year deal for Justin Hilly, and this makes a lot of sense in many, many ways. Justin Hilly has been driving for Kaulig Racing since 2019 when he left GMS Racing in 2018 to jump up to the Xfinity Series with the 11 team. And it was a little bit of a slow start at the beginning, but last year in 2020, he made an attempt for them and actually got them in their first NASCAR Cup Series race in last year's Daytona 500 in 2020. And they were attempting to run more races in the Cup Series, do a similar schedule to what they were doing this year, but they changed their mind going into 2020 due to the pandemic happening. But I think Justin Hilly's a very solid driver. We've seen how good he has been on super speedways, and time has gone on. And I think he could be a very solid driver. You never know. He's actually very underrated also on other types of tracks. Well, we've not seen this team run on the intermediate tracks throughout this year, even the short tracks. And I'd like to have seen him done that this year. But I think that Justin Hilly will be a very solid driver going into next year in the 16. Up next, we're going to talk about the 17 car for Roush Fenway Racing. While this has not been 100% confirmed at this time, it is believed that Chris Buescher will be back with Roush Fenway Racing probably at least for a couple of years. And I think it makes a lot of sense to keep a driver like Chris Buescher in the organization. I think Chris Buescher is a very, very talented and a very gifted driver. He's a driver that I think is really, really underrated too. Because I think so far this year, he unfortunately did not make the playoffs, and he's had a couple really bad runs lately and kind of had a bad stretch up until a couple weeks ago. I think that the Roush cars have kind of fallen off as the year has gone on, but I think Chris Buescher is a very solid driver, and I think with Brad Keselowski coming in there to help him out going in the next year, I think that Chris Buescher is going to be able to go out there and improve going into 2022. I think Chris Buescher will do very good for this team going forward. Up next, we're going to talk about the 18 car for Joe Gibbs Racing. This one has already been confirmed. Kyle Busch will be back in the 18 car. Makes a lot of sense. Kyle Busch has won 2 championships for Joe Gibbs Racing. And while this year, the playoffs have not started off pretty well in 2021, Kyle Busch so far in 2021 has scored 2 victories this year. Those coming at Kansas early in May, and also winning at Pocono, the second Pocono doubleheader race where he probably arguably had a top 2 or top 3 car most of the day. Now, Kyle Busch definitely has been effective at practice qualifying, and I do think with practice qualifying, expected to come back in a pretty big form in some sort of capacity. I think that Kyle Busch will improve going in the next year, and I think him and Ben Bayshore will continue to improve. I think Ben Bayshore surprised me a lot, especially as a crew chief. I thought that he was really going to hurt Kyle Busch in the long run. But I think that Kyle Busch has really surprised me in a lot of ways, and he's improved as a driver. Well, he hasn't improved. He's still one of the best in the Cup Series right now. But Kyle Busch will be back in the 18. This does not surprise me at all, to be honest with you. Up next, we're going to talk about the 19 car for Joe Gibbs Racing. This one has already been confirmed. Mark Truex Jr. had already signed, I believe, about a week or 2 ago before the 500, that he signed a 1-year contract extension, or maybe a multi-year extension. It's really unknown how long the contract is, but it is believed that his contract right now only goes through the 2022 season. Mark Truex Jr. 2021 really has had a big rebound year so far as a NASCAR Cup Series driver. Mark Truex Jr. has been able to pick up 3 victories so far, and he's one of their current favorites to win the NASCAR championship in 2021. So I think Mark Truex Jr. going into next year, he'll improve, especially if practice qualifying, make his return next year. I think Mark Truex Jr. is going to continue to prove why continues to prove why he is a NASCAR Hall of Famer one day and why he is a championship caliber driver as he continues to prove that he is one of those going into next year. Up next, we're going to talk about the 20 car for Joe Gibbs Racing. This one has also been confirmed. Christopher Bell will be back in the 20 car for Joe Gibbs Racing in 2022. Now, originally the plan for Christopher Bell is he originally was supposed to get in the car next year, but things changed after 2020. He originally was supposed to drive the 95 car for Levine Family Racing in 2020 and in 2021, and then switch over to 20 in 2022. But really, things changed in 2021. After 2020, after Levine Family Racing base decided our day we're going to close down, and they moved Christopher Bell over to this ride for 2021. And so far, he's been pretty hit or miss so far. He's been pretty good at the beginning of the year, but I think as the year has gone on for him, he has had some bad moments in the middle of the year, but I think he's improved as the year has gone on, and he currently sits above the cutoff line currently at the moment. So we'll have to wait and see what happens next year. He's been hit or miss with the next car. He's been kind of having not some best comments in regards to the next-gen car. But I think that Christopher Bell will continue to prove why he's a very talented driver. And I think Christopher Bell will do pretty good going into next year. And I think he'll also improve next year as well. Next, we're going to talk about the 21 car for Wood Brothers Racing. This one has already been confirmed. Harrison Burton will be jumping up from the NASCAR Xfinity Series as he'll be moving away from the Toyota camp and moving away from Joe Gibbs Racing in the Xfinity Series. And he'll be driving the 21 car for Wood Brothers Racing in 2022. Now, originally when this rumor really started that he was going to be driving his car, I think a lot of people were really, really confused. But the more that came out about this rumor, the more that made a lot of sense. And the reason is there's 2 major reasons. One, Jeff Burton, his father, who has had a really association with the Wood Brothers Group, and there's a lot of people he knows that works with the Wood Brothers Group. They helped him overall. The second reason is KHI management, and Kevin Harvick drives a Ford, so they probably wanted to bring Harrison Burton over, especially at some of the sponsors like Hunt Brothers Pizza, and the other sponsor, Dex Imaging, that currently sponsors a bunch of people at Team Penske, and that's probably the reason why they're bringing him up to Wood Brothers next year. I'm very intrigued to see how he's going to do, because so far his Xfinity Series season has been a little bit down. He's been improving as the year has gone on, but we will see Harrison Burton in the 21 car full-time in 2022. Up next, we're going to talk about the 22 car for Team Penske. This one has already been confirmed. Joey Logano will continue driving for Team Penske at least for the next couple of years. His contract goes to the 2023 season. Joey Logano has been a very, very solid driver, and I think that he will continue to prove why he's a legendary driver. He's an awesome driver, and again, he is a driver that has had a lot of problems in the past with people, but at the same time, he is a great driver and deserves to continue driving his 22 car full-time going into 2022. Up next, we're going to talk about the 23 car for 2311 Racing, the first of 2 entries for 2311 Racing next year. This one has already also been confirmed. Bubba Wallace will continue driving the 23 car for 2311 Racing next year. This makes a lot of sense. It's a flagship car. This team was really built around Bubba Wallace, and Michael Jordan, Denny Hamlin have liked Bubba Wallace for a very, very long time, and they've continued being his owners and shown that Bubba can perform. And I think that so far this year, they really started off the year at a really, really wrong foot. But as the year has gone on, I think that this team has overall progressed. And with the driver that we'll talk about here in a little bit, I think that this team will only continue to improve. They started off this year being a team that really had a lot of inconsistencies. They were showing top 10s throughout the beginning of the year, but unfortunately, we're not getting those top 10s they should have gotten. But I do think as the year has gone on for Bubba, they've been more consistent. They've been finishing the top 10 and top 15 more consistently. They've had a couple I think 1 or 2 top 10s that have checkmarked, and also 2 top 5s this year as well in the 23 car. I think disappointing for some people, but for me, I think for a new team, they have shown promise and they have a lot of progress to go, and they have things that they need to work on, but especially with the sponsorship game as well, I think that they will continue to improve, and I think Bubba will do great things next year in 2022 in the 23 car. Up next, we're going to talk about the 24 car for Hendrick Motorsports. This one has already been confirmed. William Byron will continue driving for Hendrick Motorsports in 2022 in the 24 car. William Byron in 2021 has really taken a major step forward. He's been a guy that for the first couple years of his Cup Series career has been kind of a fringe playoff contender, but this year so far, he has really taken steps forward. He's been really, really consistent. Now, currently, he sits, I believe, 9 points outside of the cutoff line in the NASCAR Cup Series playoffs. But I think William Byron will continue to prove as a driver. And him and Rudy Fiegel have teamed up and have done a lot so far this year. And I think he will continue to prove and do a lot of good things going into next year. And I think it'll help Hendrick Motorsports and want to be one of the leaders at Hendrick Motorsports going forward, especially as he's gotten older as a driver and with new development coming in and with him being behind the scenes working with the next-gen car. I think William Byron will help this team and Hendrick Motorsports continue to be a really successful team going into 2022. Up next, we're going to talk about GMS Racing. Now, GMS Racing has said that they are planning to jump up to the Cup Series, whether it's full-time or part-time. It is not confirmed. I think the number that they are going to choose is the 26 car, and I was thinking originally that it was going to be a full-time driver like Matt DiBenedetto, but basically the driver that I have now that has changed for next year. I think, and this is going to blow your mind a little bit, but I think that Zane Smith is going to skip the NASCAR Xfinity Series, and I think somehow he is going to jump up to the Cup Series full-time or part-time in 2022. I've had a gut feeling that I think the Driver's Edge program is really going to play a factor, and I think the reason that they're going to choose Zane Smith over a driver like Sheldon Creed, as Sheldon Creed has basically said that he wants to run full-time in Xfinity next year. We don't know what organization is going to, even though it's being rumored that RCR could be a team that he does go to in 2022 in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. Maybe he then goes to GMS and Cup in the future, but I think Zane Smith is going to drive for the team part-time. I think Zane Smith will drive full-time in the Truck Series program next year, but I think that we'll see this team make some part-time starts. You never know. I could be wrong, and we see a driver like Matt DiBenedetto drive his car, but I think that Zane Smith is going to drive the 26 car for GMS Racing in 2022. Up next, we're going to talk about the 29 car for Roush Fenway Racing. Now, while I think Roush Fenway Racing is going to expand to a 3-car operation next year, however, I think that they are only going to run this car on a part-time basis next year, and I think that this is where Ryan Newman is going to go in 2022. Steve Newmark, the president of Roush Fenway Racing, because we know Ryan Newman is not going to be returning his team at all on a full-time basis next year. Steve Newmark did mention that if Ryan Newman could not find a ride going into next year, and I think it's going to be really difficult for him to find a ride going into next year, that he has potentially a good position and could put Ryan Newman in this car next year. Ryan Newman did say he's going to look other places before he makes a decision, but I think that Ryan Newman is going to come back and drive for this team. And why not? Run a couple crown jewels and then finish off your career. I think he's going to pull a similar career ending like Bill A. or Terry Labonte did, where he ran a few select races and then maybe jumps into the organization and works as a driver on a development program. I think Ryan Newman does this, and I think that he'll be a big benefactor for this team going into 2022. We'll have to wait and see what happens, and I think Ryan Newman will drive the 29 for Roush Fenway Racing in 2022. Up next, we're going to talk about the 34 car for Front Row Motorsports. This one has not been confirmed, and there's a lot of stuff to talk about in regards to Front Row. Originally, we thought that there were going to be 2 cars that we had Front Row next year, and they were continue being a Ford organization. They were not going to have any partnerships. Well, things have changed over the last couple months, really since the last time I did a silly season predictions video on this channel. Things have basically changed because there's rumors right now that 2311 may have bought or even basically purchased the organization for next year in 2022. And this might mean that drivers are out for the team. What I think really is going to go down in regards to this merger that has happened between Front Row and 2311 is that I think that one of the charters from Front Row is going to end up going over to 2311, which we'll talk about the driver here in just a few minutes, as a matter of fact. But I think that Front Row will continue to be a one-car organization. However, I think what's going to happen is that I think in 2022, I think they're going to switch from Ford and they're going to move over to Toyota next year, which they'll be able to benefit from that next year. And I think Michael McDowell is going to continue driving for the team full-time next season. I think Michael McDowell has earned it. Michael McDowell made the playoffs this year, and overall, he's shown a lot of speed of points this year. I do think that Front Row has fallen back just a little bit as time has gone on throughout this year. But I think that Michael McDowell is going to continue to drive for the team in 2022. Again, they've not confirmed if they're going to be even full-time next year. But I think if they're going to lose one of their charters for next year, I think this also means Anthony Alfredo will be out of the organization going into 2022. And we won't see him drive for the team. And I think that they will only have one car in 2022. And I think that that will go to Michael McDowell. Now, they may end up driving part-time for the 500, get a second part-time car, and maybe David Reagan or Anthony Alfredo goes there. But I think right now, I think there's only going to be one car that enters even the 500 for Front Row, and I think that that will be driven by Michael McDowell next year. Up next, we're going to talk about the 41 car for Stewart-Haas Racing. This one should be no surprise to anybody. It is expected that Cole Custer is going to be continuing to drive for the team. Cole Custer is the son of Joe Custer, who is the president of Stewart-Haas Racing, and Joe Custer does help with a lot of day in and day out operations. Now, let me speak for real. Cole Custer has not been a very impressive driver so far in his short NASCAR Cup Series career. In a couple years he's ran, he does have one win at Kentucky, but other than that win at Kentucky, he has been a driver that's really struggled throughout the last couple years. And I thought that Cole Custer by now would be able to improve. He hasn't really shown that. He's been kind of mediocre so far. Now, I do think that the equipment this year has unfortunately affected Cole Custer in a lot of ways, but I also do think that there's other factors that have contributed to Cole Custer not being as good so far this year. But I still think Cole Custer will continue to drive for this team, especially with Joe Custer having a lot of say in who goes in the team and also Gene Haas having a lot of say that's going to the team with Tony Stewart focusing on the SRX. I think that we'll see Cole Custer continue to drive for this team in 2022. Up next, we're going to talk about the 43 car for Richard Petty Motorsports. This has already been confirmed. Eric Jones will drive the 43 car full-time in 2022. Now, a lot of us thought that originally he had a multi-year deal with the team, but apparently he had a one-year deal with the team with an option year, but they have decided to keep Eric Jones in this organization also on that option year as well. Eric Jones absolutely deserves it. Let's be for real, I think Eric Jones absolutely deserves better than what he's getting next year. But it's good for him to have stability going into next year, because I think Eric Jones is a very, very good driver. And I know that basically doesn't look like it. He basically downgraded from Joe Gms Racing in the 20 team down over to the 43 team. But that being said, I think that this team could have a lot of stability going into next year. This could be a benefit for the team going forward. And I'm glad that Eric Jones will continue to drive for the team. And it's been confirmed that they will be driving Chevys going into next year. I know there's been some speculation about Richard Petty Motorsports maybe switching over to Toyota going next year. But I think that we're going to see this team continue driving Chevys in 2022. Up next, we're going to talk about the second 2311 car, the 45 car. This one is confirmed. And after months of speculation, it is finally confirmed that Kurt Busch is going to drive the 45 car full-time for 2311 Racing with Monster Energy backing going into next year, along with the fact that they're going to be spending $10 million of Monster Energy. Again, crew chiefs has not been announced and spotters have not been announced. We know Monster Energy is going to be backing, and he's going to be driving a second 2311 racing car. This is huge for 2311 Racing in many, many ways why he's going over to his organization. I think the biggest reason is that Kurt Busch is a championship caliber driver, and it doesn't matter what team he goes to. He has been able to go out there and prove that he still has got it. And he's, I think, one of the most underrated drivers in NASCAR history with over 30 career NASCAR Cup Series victories. And not to mention, he's a driver that has won a championship back in 2004 in the NASCAR Cup Series. I think he's going to be a huge benefit for 2311 Racing going into next year. And not to mention, I think he's also going to be a really good mentor for Bubba Wallace next year. Bubba Wallace needs a mentor and a guidance for next year, I think, to help Bubba improve his craft going into next year. And I think with a driver like Kurt Busch coming in and working with him next year, I think that Bubba Wallace will improve, and I would not be surprised if Kurt Busch not only he wins some races next year, but I would also not be surprised if we see Bubba Wallace pick up some wins next year. I think Kurt's going to for sure win, but I think Bubba's also going to win races next season. Up next, we're going to talk about the 47 car for JTG Doherty Racing. While we have no confirmation in regards to who's going to be driving this car, it is believed, according to multiple reporters, that Ricky Stenhouse Jr. is going to continue driving his car for 2022. Again, manufacturer has not been confirmed at this time, but they will also only be a one-car team next year, as they have confirmed Brad Doherty and Tag Scheckter have confirmed that they will be downsizing from a two-car operation to a one-car operation, as they are not going to be pursuing a charter going into next year, which means that Ryan Preece is not going to be driving for the organization next year. But I think Ricky Stenhouse Jr. being his team and keeping the team makes a lot of sense. For a lot of this year in 2021 especially, he's been competing for the overall for the playoffs. Now, he did not make the playoffs this year, but they've been a top 20 team majority of the season. And for a lot of the year especially, this 47 team was actually in the top 16 in points. So it makes a ton of sense to keep a driver like Ricky Stenhouse Jr. in the organization. And a lot of people call him Ricky Stenhouse Jr. But I think the older that Ricky has gotten, the better and smarter he's gotten as a race car driver. And I think that we'll continue seeing him drive his car in 2022. And I think that even though they drove a Chevy here in the test, I think that with the rumors and potential rumors, I think that they are also going to switch Toyota next year in 2022. Up next, we're going to talk about the 48 car for Hendrick Motorsports. This one was already confirmed. Alex Bowman will continue driving for Hendrick Motorsports through the 2023 season. Alex Bowman so far in 2021 has had a very, very solid year, with him so far scoring 3 victories at Dover, also winning at Richmond, and also winning at Pocono this year. A couple of those being lucky wins for him, but still, Alex Bowman has been a very good driver. He's also known as a track killer, by the way, but Alex Bowman has really had a big breakout year so far, and you never know, he could be an underdog to win the 2021 NASCAR Cup Series Championship, but I would not be surprised if Alex Bowman gets more than one win in 2022, and I think that he'll be a driver that continues to shape Hendrick Motorsports' future, especially into the era of the next-gen car. I think Alex Bowman will be a big benefactor and helper to this team going into 2022. Up next, we're going to talk about the second and final Rick Racing car, the 51 car. This car is going to be the rotation car, so there's going to be a few drivers that I think are going to drive in this car. I think that Cody Ware, Josh Blicky, and JJ Yeley are going to be the main drivers that drive in this car. I think that they're probably the 3 best drivers. Maybe some other guys like Joey Gase getting an opportunity to drive. But I think especially with Cody Ware being the son of Rick Ware, he's probably going to run a few races, though. There is speculation he could run full-time in IndyCar next year. It's not been confirmed. But he could drive over there in IndyCar in a lot of races next year. Josh Blicky, while he hasn't been very, very great to watch this year, I think he's a very talented driver. I don't think the 52 car is great. And JJ Yeley, I think, is going to get this gig as well. Because let's be real, JJ Yeley ran top 30 at National. I know he has a lot of experience at National, and I think that experience does help, especially with no lack of practice qualifying. But I think that those are going to be the drivers who drive the 51 car, and this will be a rotation. It will be a little bit more competitive in 2022. Up next, we're going to talk about the 61 car for Starcom Racing. This is going to be the one that is going to be the car where there are going to be multiple drivers that are going to end up driving this car. The drivers I think are going to drive it as of now are AJ Allmendinger and Kaz Grala. However, I do think that there is a good opportunity that a driver maybe like Ryan Newman is going to get an opportunity to drive his car going into next year, especially if Ryan Newman, we already talked about Ryan Newman here in this episode, but I think for sure that we'll see AJ Allmendinger, especially a guy that's good on road course. Again, it's unconfirmed how many road courses are going to be on the NASCAR Cup Series schedule next year. And I also think that Kaz Grala could get into that ride as well. But I think for sure AJ Allmendinger and Kaz Grala, and maybe a couple of drivers like Ryan Newman, among others, that could get an opportunity to drive in his car next year. I think we'll see a few drivers in this one, and maybe they'll get a full-time driver like Matt DiBenedetto again, and if he is able to bring funding. But we will for sure see AJ Allmendinger next year. We already have confirmation on that, and we'll see a few other drivers get an opportunity to drive the 61 car next year. Up next, we're going to talk about the 62 car for Beard Motorsports. Beard Motorsports confirmed this past week that they are going to be attempting the Daytona 500 and a couple of the other super speed races. They have purchased a next-gen chassis, and they will compete in the Daytona 500 attempt to qualify for that event, along with the other super speed races at Daytona and Talladega as well. It's great to see that. There's been a lot of speculation. Maybe they had shut down again. None of the main media members have basically confirmed those reports, but they will be back. And there's been a lot of teasing going on in regards to this because Noah Gragson has a fire suit for Beard Motorsports, and I think speculation began to grow in regards to that. I think that Noah Gragson is going to be the one driving the 62 car for Beer Motorsports because he is a Las Vegas native, and he actually did drive for them, attempt to make the Daytona 500 with them earlier this year in that 62 car. So I think that Noah Gragson, because he is going full-time with Junior Motorsports next year, I think that Noah Gragson is going to drive the 62 car in those super speed races, and maybe in the foreseeable future, Beer Motorsports will make the upcharge, and they will attempt to run more races in 2022 if they decide to. I know they're running super speedways, but maybe in the future they could purchase a charter and go full-time in 2023. We'll have to wait and see what happens on that. Up next, we're going to talk about the 66 car for NBM Motorsports. While I have no confirmation in regards to the second NBM Motorsports car, I think that this is going to be more of the flashy car that is going to run. We had confirmation a couple weeks ago from Rookie that basically they are going to be attempting to run next year with the next-gen car, and I think that Timmy Hill will continue driving for them in their Cup Series program. Timmy Hill is a very, very good driver. He's a driver that's known how to get it done on and off the racetrack. He's a very, very good driver. And again, he's gotten the best out of his equipment too in Xfinity, and he's very, very a good driver also in iRacing, not to mention. So I think he deserves this opportunity. He's been driving basically the flagship driver at NBM Motorsports for as long as I can remember. So I think that Timmy Hill will continue driving the 66. Maybe they get drivers like Stephen Light and Davis Starr to get a few starts in the 66 car, but I think for a majority year at least, we will see Timmy Hill drive the 66 car full-time for the organization. Up next, we're going to talk about the 77 car for Spire Motorsports. Like I mentioned in the beginning of this episode, it is believed right now that Spire Motorsports has purchased another charter from Starcom Racing, and they will run a second full-time car going into next year. Now, like I mentioned a little bit ago, Ryan Preece is not going to be driving the 37 car, and I think that he is actually going to be driving this 77 car for Spire Motorsports next year. I think the 77 car next year, if it's what we, especially if it's been a little bit better, like we've seen out of the 7 car, I think that we're going to see Ryan Preece drive his car full-time next year. Again, funding will be a major, major issue for this team, but they basically have a charter for this car, so they really aren't going to have as many issues of funding. And I think if they have 2 full-time cars and not just 1 car where they run part-time like it did with a couple drivers over the last couple years and focus on 2 full-time drivers, work with especially 2 drivers that are very talented, I think that this will work out very successfully for this organization. So I think that Ryan Preece will go full-time with Spire Motorsports next year, and it'll make a little bit of a jump. I thought potentially he can maybe go back down to Xfinity, but I think if he wants to stay in Cup, I think going to Spire would not be a bad option, and I think he'll take the second full-time Spire Motorsports car in 2022. Up next, we're going to talk about the 78 car for Live Fast Motorsports. This one pretty much should be in basically no surprise. I think BJ McLeod is going to drive for this team full-time going into next year. Well, basically full-time with a couple other exceptions, maybe the road courses and maybe the dirt race as well. I think that you'll see BJ run a majority of races, including Daytona 578 car. And I think that drivers like Kyle Tilley, Shane Golobic, and maybe some other road ringers are going to get an opportunity to race in these cars. So I think that that's going to happen to 78 team. Remember, BJ did say back at Charlotte during the Coke 600 that they are not going to be selling any of their charters next year as they do want to compete in the Cup Series. And I think that there is potential that the 78 team could take some major steps going forward next year. I think that BJ McLeod, among others like Kyle Tilley and Shane Golobic, will drive for this car team in 2021. And of course, in ownership, I think it'd been smarter to have another driver come in like a driver that's as good as Eric Jones come in and drive full-time for the team, or maybe put Kyle Tilley or Shane Golobic in the car full-time. But I understand what BJ McLeod is trying to do. He's trying to come out there and compete and race here in 2022. Up next, we're going to talk about the 96 car for Gaunt Brothers Racing. There's really a lot of speculation in regards to what Gaunt Brothers Racing is going to do next year. So here's what I think they're going to do. I think that they're going to choose a couple drivers driving at Joe Gibbs Racing going in next year. And I think that they're going to run quite a few races next year. I think they're going to increase their inventory, especially since I think that Daniel Hemrick, with that Poppy Bank sponsorship, he's going to make some select Cup Series starts. I think he's going to make 5 or 6 starts with the team next year. And I also think that Brandon Jones is going to make a ton of Cup Series starts in 2022 with the team. I know there may be some people think he should go full-time with the team. I think Brandon Jones, I just don't know if Gaunt Brothers is going to be able to get a charter. I think that if they're going to want to go full-time, they're going to need to have a charter because, again, they really don't have a ton of payouts. So I think they're going to run more than they did this year. I think instead of running 12 races, I think they're going to run maybe up to 20 or even 25 races next year. And I think in the future, if they do well enough, they could be in the market for a charter, but I think that Gaunt Brothers will drive in the Cup Series next year. And I think that we'll see Daniel Hemrick make some Cup starts and Brandon Jones make some Cup Series starts next year. And finally, we are talking about the number 99 for Trackhouse Racing. This one has been confirmed. We are going to see Daniel Suarez drive his car full-time in 2022. Daniel Suarez this year hasn't really impressed me so far with Trackhouse Racing. He's not a driver that's been contending for a championship, but there's been a few times this year where I've seen Daniel Suarez run really, really well. The last 2 weeks haven't been really, really impressive, don't get me wrong. But I think Daniel Suarez, as time has gone on, has improved as a driver this year. I know he sits like 23rd or 24th to points, but again, a lot of reliability issues have come up with the team. But you have to remember, they are purchasing the Chip Ganassi Racing organization. The Trackhouse team is, so they have a lot of money and a lot of resources going next year. And one thing like 2311 Racing, they do have full sponsorship, which will really, really affect them next year. So I'm really happy to see that Daniel Suarez is going to come back to this team next year, and I think that he'll be a big benefactor for this team going into 2022. So anyway, that is my final 2021 NASCAR Cup Series Silly Season Predictions video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, turn notifications so you're notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and support my page below. Link schedule below for that. And combo your predictions for 2022 in the comments below. What do you think the lineup is going to be for next year? Do you think my lineup is crazy? Or do you think my lineup is pretty realistic of what do you think it's going to be for next year? Let me know in the comments below. Anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's video. And I'll see you guys next time for some more great, awesome NASCAR content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.